have Mr. Alexander. He teaches computer science and robotics.
Okay, the sign, we'll philosophize through food. Maslow's hierarchy of needs says I don't think so. So, what I'm going to talk to you about today is how creativity and ingenuity has stimulated our economy throughout the United States history. So the title of mine is Challenge Accepted. We'll get to that in a second. Okay, if I asked you to think of an inventor, you probably maybe thought about the Wright brothers, maybe Edison, or Alexander Graham Bell. Most of the time when I ask people to do that, it's going to be somebody that's not from a current generation. So somebody that's dead. Part of that problem is that I've heard Dean came and he started up First Robotics, and he's also an inventor currently. He said that 80% of our income nationally has come from science and tech, at least historically. The American Chemical Society said that from World War II to now, the investment we put into science and tech has given us half of our growth as far as economic growth. Other things that we see as far as ingenuity that our countries come up with, from NASA, which does a lot of that, scratch-resistant lenses like what I have on, that was actually part of the moon helmet, the coating that they put on it. Athletic shoe insoles, they were from moon boots. The cordless tools that you see that we use all the time in robotics, those were actually first on the moon. So all these things promoted jobs for us. So our economy historically has been based on those inventors. When you think of Ford inventing the automobile, that produced jobs. The Wright brothers coming up with the airplane, we have like Boeing here, that produces jobs. What we've been seeing though lately is that there's some lack of ingenuity in some of these companies. The big three automakers, for example. They came into a crisis. They were focused, or they kind of just went with the status quo. They were making SUVs, making lots of money off of that, by the way. And the imports all had better fuel economy and stuff like that. All of a sudden, gas prices get really high, and people can't afford the gas. They get rid of the SUVs, and they start buying foreign cars. Well, that led to massive job losses. So we had a lot of the factories that had to close down. Not to mention we had to pump a bunch of money into those different companies. The other problem we're starting to see is that there's unbalanced global trade as far as the US is concerned. If you try and go buy a product, most of the time that product is going to be made from what? Yeah, you guys know that. That's not how it used to be. I went recently to go try and find a roasting electric roaster, and I wanted to make sure it was American made. I could not find one. I found one company that said that it should be American made, but even that one was from China. So part of that problem is that after a while, we have more products that we're buying out from the rest of the world, and we have less products going out, so there's unbalanced trade there. We start to see our money going out then. If you picture your wallet, you have to have money coming into your wallet and going out and keep it equal. Well, if you have more money going out, pretty soon that wallet's empty and you don't have anything to buy. So some of the companies that do articles on this, there's a lot of information out there. CNN Money has an article that talks about how the number of, or the percentage of like engineering, science, technology majors, it's been going down over the past 20 years. It used to be 6.8%, now it's at 4.5%. Time.com did an article and was talking about the next great resource shortage, and it's US scientists. They say that that's the key to our future competitiveness globally, but yet we've seen a decline and people aren't going into that. Now the rest of the world stepped up. We have lots of engineers from India and from China, and in order for us to compete globally, we need to see that change. What's been the difference? Well, societal norms is one thing that we can see. Society as a whole used to celebrate all of our inventors. Like it was like, hey, the Wright brothers are going to go try and fly their crazy plane. So everyone shows up there to watch and try and fly it. Or they'd show up at Edison and go see his light bulbs because nobody else had them. So they'd go check that out. We get that a little bit like with the Apple Store. Hey, there's a new iPad coming out. Well, there's a lot of people that show up to see it. But it's not celebrated like it used to be. Instead, now we celebrate. I can see it. There's an S there. It's actually Penn State. It's all the audience for the football game. So they're all dressed up celebrating football. We have other people that are celebrating entertainers, or society as a whole. And so when we start to celebrate that, that's what we start to get out of it. The other problem that we see society-wise is that they view people that are innovative and understanding and knowledgeable as nerds. So who wants to be a nerd? Well, that's good. I get some. The other thing that I've started to see in our society is that it's socially acceptable for people to say, teachers even, I've been in meetings and the teachers say, well, I'm not very good at math. What if you said you couldn't read? They'd look at you like, that's crazy, but yet it's okay for them to say that they're not good at math. That needs to change. I'm starting to see some slight changes. For example, I don't know if you guys saw the commercial by Intel, but there was a commercial where they said, this is our rock star. And out comes the guy that invented USB, and he's like, fiddling along. It was like, hey, he's a rock star to me. I used to have to take those 1.4 megabyte floppy disks. Now I've got an 8 gig flash drive. Okay, another problem is the school systems. One thing I see as a teacher in the school systems is, for some reason, students just want the answer. So I teach computer science. I give you a tool, and you have to use that tool to do something. Well, I have students that just want to know, what's the code? Well, I gave you the tool, you have to figure out that code, and you have to use that tool. The other thing is it's not okay to fail for students. So what should happen, like Thomas Edison, for example, when he's inventing the light bulb, he didn't get it right the first time. The first time he learned something, and then he tried again. And he learned something else, and he tried again. So instead of seeing that as a failure, see it as a learning experience. Go out and try something. Don't be afraid to fail, because nobody gets it right the first time. In our robotics, we get to try and try again. We get 6 weeks for our first one, and we usually try something, and it never works right. And then you learn something, and you try it again. So we've experienced that. But in a normal classroom, they don't allow that. It's like, oh, my lab didn't work right. I got to fudge my data and make it so that it looks like what it's supposed to be. That's not how it should be. You should be able to say, my lab didn't work correctly. I think this is why I learned something. We try and do that, like with the MIP project and the extended essays. We're trying to have you guys learn something with that. Also, multiple answers. If you come at a math answer, for example, I do this with like 15 times something. Well, I multiply it by 10, and then I take half of it and I add it. Well, that's a different way of doing it rather than, okay, take the first digit, multiply it all out, keep the columns, and then add everything together. So if you think of other ways of coming about an answer, schools don't like that. I want to see your work, I want to see it all written down, and it needs to be in these orders. So that's one disservice I think that you can run into. Also, different answers aren't supported. So divergent thinking, coming up with other answers, is something else that's going to help you be innovative, which isn't necessarily supported here. Partly, I think, why all this is the system focuses on standardized testing. So you need to know the answer, just like you tried to do up at the beginning. So is that your fault? Not necessarily, but you can work at getting past that. in order to be creative. Okay, there is good news. So that was kind of bad news, but there's Neil Howe wrote a book called The Millennial Rising. So most of you in here are going to be the millennial generation. One thing that he said is that you guys have what it takes to be the next greatest generation. But do you know what the greatest generation is? This is my great uncle, Ernest Carlsford. Okay, he was a farmer in Minnesota, but that's not so great. He was in World War II, and he was in 4 different theaters, so he got 4 different campaign medals. He had 8 silver battle stars. He had 3 Purple Hearts, and he got the Congressional Medal of Honor. Okay, but he's not the only one that makes it. He's not the only one that makes it the greatest generation now. At the same time he was doing that, the women that were back in the States were working the factories. Everybody had rations. Everybody did their part and pitched in. So what makes you guys possible to be that next greatest generation? Neil Howe said that you guys are confident. That's a good thing. That's just like that generation. You're upbeat. You're open to change. You have passion for accomplishment. You have an inner social conscience. And you're the best educated generation of this country. Okay, so innovation, how are you going to do that? When you're doing those questions that this Hal talked about, those questions have to have you have a deep understanding of the topic. And it doesn't matter if you're going to be innovative in science or tech, or maybe it's economics, or it could be in English, or it could be in another subject. To take that innovation, you have to apply what your deep understanding is and start to tinker with things. So if you're like, I wonder what would happen if I did this, and then you start to play with it. So in your spare time, or even in class as you're starting to understand it, that could be questions that you're asking yourself in the back of your head. I have some examples of this with my students. I have a student who, he already took the AP computer science exam, and now he's actually working in the field a little bit. He has a job doing that. But in the spare time and in some of my classes, he's been working on an app for the Android, so that if it gets stolen, he's got a way to remotely be able to get your picture and then send it back to him. And then he finds out GPS where you are, and then he can go back and he can turn the volume up and make the ringer go off so he finds you. People might want to buy that app. If there are people in Europe that buy that app, he's bringing money back to here. So that's one example. I have another example where they're tinkering with a Minecraft server. And they made a button so that the button, when they went with a certain keystroke and they hit the button, it flew diamonds everywhere. Okay? Somebody else goes, oh, that's a diamond button. They go over, they press the button, it drops all their items and logs them off their computer. So it was something fun that they did, but they understood that program. The other thing is you have to get involved. So here's an example of what we do. Getting involved in robotics, you could do that if you wanted, but you also, if you have other areas that you're interested in, maybe not that, get involved. If you're interested in economics, then find a club or some other class you can take that you can get involved in it. With this one, the way we were innovative is if you look right in the middle, that's our electronics. All the other ROVs that are out there, they all use sealed electronics, and almost all of them leak. Well, we needed to find a way, because we weren't very successful with having a sealed electronics. We found a different way to try. We actually used this right here as a cover that went in, and it stored a bubble of air. And that bubble of air we had to maintain the volume of, because at different pressures it's going to compress and everything. So, but we were able to do that, and we got third place this year in our competitions. So that was one way we were doing it. Okay, what are your possibilities? Well, economic is an obvious one. We've been going through a recession. 10% unemployment, that type of stuff. So you guys know that one, you've heard it in the news a lot. Another one can be energy sources. So for example, if we get better efficiency in our solar panels and the price comes down, more houses might have that. That could solve some of our electrical problems as far as the grid's concerned, where they've had some power outages, like California had to have roving power outages because the grid couldn't handle it, they couldn't make enough energy. Other types of products that you can sell to the rest of the world, kind of like that app that he's working on. Safety things. So for example, back in the 60s, the cars didn't have seatbelts. Well, we saw that now we have seatbelts because that was a safety issue. Then we have people start drunk driving. Well, now we need to have a safety issue. They come up with an interlock device. What type of safety issues do we see now? Well, as I'm driving, let me text somebody, and then I'm not watching what I'm doing, and then I've had accidents and injuries like that. So that could be one of your possibilities. Some more are reduced dependency on single factor items, like for example, our whole economy seems based on oil. If we have a shortage or the price goes up, all of our prices of everything goes up. Like food, oh my gosh, I can't believe what food is right now. I have 8 kids and I have to feed them all, and so my prices are like, the other ones are healthcare. So one of the things that we see problems with is healthcare has really started to get expensive, and the amount of coverage isn't there as much. So if you can figure out ways to solve that. National debt, we used to be in billions is what I remember. Now we're in trillions. It's like, that's all being handed to you guys. So you're gonna have to come up with innovation and creative solutions for that. Okay, lastly, there's got to be some collaboration that you do. So a lot of times you're going to get people that are the people that can solve the problem if you tell them how. Like, I want this type of a solution. But yet they're not good at thinking of the solutions. The people that are the thinkers of the solutions are called visionaries. A lot of times the visionaries aren't the doers, and the doers aren't the visionaries. So with that, you're going to have to collaborate. The other part that you'll see is, even from the beginning, people haven't got along. Our forefathers of the U.S. couldn't agree. Should we give the states more power? Should we give the federal government more power? So what did they do? They compromised. Okay, that's almost a dirty word in our day and age. But that's something that has to happen in order for us to move along. So one thing you guys are going to have to do is to find people and work out compromises. Okay, so lastly, in closing, if you become the inventor, you're going to create jobs. If you create jobs for people, that 10%, you'll be their hero. Do you want to be their hero?
Yeah.
Okay, you're the next generation that has the possibility of being the greatest generation. So the question comes to why? Become the next greatest generation? I think you guys are going to say,